record and then sharing it to live on Facebook.
Okay, people are coming in.
Okay.
Thank. All right, looks like everybody's in. That's in the waiting room.
Okay.
And I see that it's recording, but I don't know about sharing.
It is recorded. Hold on a second.
I don't know if it's sharing right. I can't see.
Yours
that.
is sharing.
It's sharing. Okay.
Yeah, it's sharing right. You might want to go back one slide.
Okay.
Just
Oh,
to the
like there.
beginning.
Woo. All right.
Can somebody check, see whether it's live?
It's live.
It is live?
Yep.
On
It's live and
Facebook?
recording.
It's live and recording,
Yep.
and everyone is admitted.
Everybody's in that's here.
We're good to go.
Good to go.
All right, so who's going to be the MC for today?
Well, I am going first so I can introduce everyone. So welcome to our last chat with Green Aggies for the year 2021. Bittersweet day, I guess. So unfortunately, we weren't able to have everybody with us today. I think Paul Winsky's having some computer issues, and Becky is on the road today, and so stuck with us today. So today we've got Dr. Mung Mung Gu with us. And where are you located currently in your photo?
South Africa. South
right.
Africa, yes. Thank you.
Great. We got Dr. Kevin Ong coming to us live from his office, looks like. And we have Laura Miller from her office too. And then I am in a hotel room in Kansas. And so this is definitely a travel season for a lot of us, ramping up conference seasons and all that stuff. So we're happy to be here today. And we're going to kind of talk about a year in review from a few events that we had, you know, some changes and some regulations and things to think about for the winter season and all of that kind of stuff. So I will go ahead and get started. Review, aka rear view. Nice. Plant sciences will save the earth. All right, so our first topic is going to be just some changes in herbicides for turfgrass use. And so every, I don't know, 10, 15 years, a lot of these herbicides go up for either re-registration or changes on the label. Let's look at, you know, what has happened in these past many years and take a look at how some of these active ingredients can change and how we can use them differently. So that's the first thing we'll look at. Go ahead, Laura. So the first ones I want to talk about are both in the Triazine group. These are both group 5 chemicals in mode of action. And so they are photosystem 2 inhibitors, but these are very commonly used active ingredients in both turf and agronomic systems as well. And so Atrazine was actually, I think that the decision on Atrazine came out last year, but it includes some reductions on the application rates of specifically residential turf. And so if you don't already know, atrazine and simazine are very commonly found as a contaminant in groundwater. And so there's a lot of issues with, you know, the overuse and then just the misapplication of these chemicals, especially atrazine is pretty commonly found in groundwater contamination. So basically what they've done is they have reduced both the granular application rate and the spray formulation. And so it's not a big change, but so granular formations on residential turf, so any type of home lawn system, it went from 2.2 to 2 pounds of active ingredient per acre. So that seems like a small change, but it's still, you know, pretty significant, and we need to be made aware of that. And now the spray formulations, back in 2004, they already specified a maximum single application rate of 1 pound of AI per acre, but now they have taken that overall rate down to 1 pound. And so that's going to be the maximum you can use at single application, but also the maximum you can use for the actual rate. And so just to be aware of that, the labels are changing. Language is also changing on the label to include some more drift type concerns and nozzles even. And so just be aware that things are changing. So on the other front, simazine. They were considering taking simazine from both residential turf and the recreation systems, so like parks and rec systems. They have chosen not to remove the use site, but they have made some changes to the application rates. So it went down from 2 pounds of AI per acre to 1.6 pounds of AI per acre. And that's with the caveat that you will commit to watering it in immediately. And so you have to water it in with a 1/2 inch of water immediately after application. And so there's another caveat. If you, for some reason, cannot do that, you're not able to water it in, then you have to adopt further label requirements. And so if you can't water it in, then the maximum application rate is further reduced to 0.65 pounds of AI per acre. And that just addresses the potential issues of post-application error and increased turf risk, increased environmental safety. And so if you water it in, 1.6 pounds of AI per acre. If you can't water it in, then you have to further reduce it to 0.65. Okay, so those are just some updates on that. Oxadiazone. So this is the active ingredient in a commonly known chemical called Ronstar. Oxadiazone is up for interim decision this year on the EPA. And so I think they're still taking comments and all that stuff. We wrote a letter in support of, keeping the current label as is and reasons why and all that stuff. So basically what the EPA is proposing is that they are going to remove all use sites except for golf course fairways and sod farms. And so the big potential detriment to that is that oxadiazone is currently the only pre-emergent that's labeled for like sprigging use. It's not going to have an impact on rooting or anything like that. And it's also one of the only pre-emergents that we can use on golf course greens for weeds like goosegrass, resistance management tool, because we have a lot of resistance issues in group number 3, and then Ronstar's in group number 14. So this could be pretty detrimental for us in some of our use sites, especially when we're establishing grass and things like that. And so we are hoping that they, reconsider some of the use sites that they're thinking about taking off. But anyway, they're still looking at a rate reduction, both with the liquid formation and with the granular formation. And it talks about some additional verbiage like, hey, maximum use rate is 3 pounds per acre with use limited to 1 application per year. However, if you do use that formulation, another application can be followed 120 days later with the granular formation. So it's getting confusing. And so you just need to be aware that the decision hasn't been made yet, but it's something that's going to be made in the coming year for sure.
And Chrissy, I'll just say too that oxadiazone is pretty important in nursery weed management as well. And so definitely. It's, pretty widely used. And for those reasons, it doesn't really inhibit root growth, and it's a different mode of action. So
definitely
it's kind of a big deal.
It is. It's a big deal. And Ronstar G as the trade name is it was currently being manufactured by Bayer. but Bayer is no longer supporting the Ronstar name anymore. And so we'll likely see that be pushed into like a Harold's or a BWI, where they'll be putting it on a fertilizer. You know, you can currently buy an Anderson's product that's labeled for golf greens with a fertilizer attached to it, but you can also still buy oxidizone on the generic front from QualiPro. But just know that, you know, there's some supply issues with Ronstar G, and I don't know how much longer you will be able to find it. And so that's really all for oxidizone. And last but not least, I think we mentioned this in a previous one, but, you know, Bayer has decided to remove Roundup as it's currently being sold with the glyphosate active ingredient from the residential market. And so as early as January 2023, those will be removed from the home and garden shelves. So no more Lowe's, no more Home Depot Roundup with glyphosate in it. Now, Roundup will still be available as a different product by Bayer. And so on the home and lawn market, you still might see Roundup for lawns, you know, for other weed control, but it won't be glyphosate anymore. So, you know, glyphosate will still be out there. Of course, you can still buy it on a commercial front, but just a homeowner can no longer go as soon as 2023 to Lowe's and buy glyphosate. They say it's due to litigation reasons. Probably 85-90% of their cases are from the home and garden market, and so they're just trying to remove it to get out of that stuff. So that's just kind of a little update.
Thank you, Chrissy. Do you think that when glyphosate is not available to homeowners, would they use glyphosate?
Well, the thing about it is that they can still get it, right? I mean,
okay.
they can still buy it, but it won't be under the Roundup name on the home and lawn market. They could buy a concentrated version under another name if they wanted to, which would lead to more potential application errors, because then they're going to have to mix that product and do all that kind of stuff. And so yeah, you know,
and then the other thing is, in most cases, don't you need license to buy those more concentrated forms? No,
you can get anything you want to.
Okay, all right. I forgot. Yeah, this is the this is the new era. You're right.
There are some restricted use chemicals, but you can still get them in certain quantities, smaller quantities sometimes. So, you know, if you want a chemical this day and age, you can get it. So that's just going to lead to some more potential environmental, you know, things and stuff like that. So.
Yeah. Geez. Okay.
I know, it's kind of scary.
It is. It's kind of scary. I also think one thing you said points out the importance of reading an actual label and seeing what your active ingredient is, because I think they will probably sell something as Roundup and it will not be what you're used to.
It won't be glyphosate anymore.
So you should definitely always read and follow your label instructions and make sure that you're getting the active ingredient that you're looking for. So, okay. All right. So I just kind of approached this in a different way. I just went through and looked at like, gosh, what happened this year? And the first really enormous thing that we're still talking about and still dealing with was the February cold snap. And it was cold. Our highs were below 20 for several days here in Tarrant County, and our lows were really low, and lots of plants suffered. This is my picture. I happen to have some Indian hawthorn inside my house and with some cut flowers. And this is the outside the house that day after it froze. And it's just been really hard on lots of plant materials that we use very widely. And I'm still seeing brown Indian hawthorn around town. They are still out there. This is a view from the parking garage after the snow melted in February, but these live oaks looked horrible. Today they look great, but some live oaks, and this is a younger one, a smaller one, this is in August, are still not where they should be. They're trying to stay alive, and I think like this tree will make it, but they're struggling to put out leaves. I think the damage to live oaks in this area shocked everyone because we think of those as being really tough trees, and they are, but they're also coastal species, and there's a lot of genetic variation in the trees that we have in our landscapes, especially. Some of them come from pretty far south, so they're a different provenance. And then there's just genetic variation in the trees themselves because they're seed propagated. So some of them are more cold hardy than others. And we're still seeing the impact of this, and will be for a long time. When we had Dr. Apple talk to us, he talked about that tree death spiral. And I think about that a lot, not just with trees, but also with people. We've had a lot of stress. This was just one of the things that happened, and it's hard. You get stressor on stressor. So if a tree was already not in good shape, or was recently planted, or if it had some other situations going on, or maybe it's just a street tree without enough room for its roots, that freezing temperature was really hard on it. So I could talk about that all day, but I won't. One great thing that happened to me this summer, I had a wonderful summer intern, Julia Minter, who's probably somewhere in College Station working on her master's degree today. But a project that we did was trying to get a quick soil health snapshot. So we went out to several farms, took a sample of soil in an area that was actively managed, actively farmed, and then another sample from an area that was presumably the same soil, but not being actively used or managed at the time. And we just looked at a number of soil health indicators in both the soil lab and also in our homemade soil lab here in the office. And one of the cool things Julia found was an app from Australia that measures the slaking index on soils. So how quickly the aggregates fall apart in water. And you know, it was just fun. It was just cool. I just really enjoyed doing it. I have a lot of interesting data, and I'll just sum it all up. Yeah, organic material is great in your soil. It makes a big difference in all aspects of soil health. All right, TNLA Expo. If you remember the day that we ran around and talked to a bunch of different people, I didn't have that many pictures from TNLA Expo. Too many of them were of this nature, whoops. But this was one thing that I did take a picture of plant-wise. We often think a lot and talk a lot about low water use plants and plants that can handle really, difficult situations. And when I think about a tree that can do that, I always think about a mesquite tree. And people don't like mesquite trees because they're thorny and kind of difficult to manage, and they are. But this is a grafted mesquite. It's got the Chilean thornless mesquite grafted onto a native rootstock, which I just thought was kind of cool. And maybe we'll see more of that as we work toward developing just a tougher tree palette. But you can always go back to the playlist. You can hear from all kinds of cool people that we talked to at TNLA Expo. International travel was really difficult this year, but I managed to go to Mexico. You can see, look, here I am on the other side of the wall. We actually didn't cross the river during our Hort retreat, but my cell phone said, "You have entered Mexico. Welcome to Mexico. You'll be charged this much for every call." So here we are on the other side of the border. This is a Border Patrol vehicle. These are all horticulture agents taking pictures of me taking this picture of myself with the mesquite tree in the background at the border wall. But I also just wanted to show you, in Texas, we have some really cool plants. If you travel from north to south to east to west, you're going to see lots of different stuff. This is a Vases Adelia, which is just the coolest looking thing. I'm sure it's probably a zone 10 plant, or maybe it's zone 9, but it's just a beautiful plant. Really a pretty dark green, a beautiful growth habit, just stands out in a crowd. And then this is a more familiar plant on both sides, the Cordia boyceri, or Mexican olive, we call it, with the big white flowers. You'll see this in San Antonio and in all of South Texas, but it's just another native Texas plant that's become popular. That we forget how cool all our plants are. Mungman's got a picture of South Africa behind her, and Our friend Adam Black went to South Africa this year. That's where she got that. She didn't go, but we were all drooling all over his plants every single day on social media. And it did make me think a lot about how we have lots of cool plants and we just need to get out there and see them and enjoy them and appreciate them. So here's my actual international travel. I actually went to Canada. I had to be vaccinated. I had to get a COVID test. And this is the border crossing. And for anyone who's ever regularly crossed an international border by car or truck, you know that typically whether you're going north or you're going south or you're coming back, the border lines can be really, really, really long. Like you'll wait for hours sometimes just to cross the border, but this was crossing into Canada. Nobody was going. So here we were heading into Canada, into British Columbia. I went to Butchart Gardens, which is the place I had just always wanted to go. And we did not get to go in 2020 when I had planned to go. So I went this year in 2021. That's kind of the money shot. These are some of the old, like it's a old cement quarry, y'all. This is a hole in the ground. Someone just decided, someone being Jenny Butchart, that it would make a great garden. And she started planting stuff like these are old Lombardy poplars that she planted. These two, and I forget what they are, were one of the original plants that were planted in the garden. But it's just a beautiful place. It has plants from all over and kind of amazing just to see something so fun and exciting that you've always seen pictures of in real life.
Laura, this is probably the most famous sunken garden in the world.
Yeah.
It just, you go through a dense wood and then suddenly it opens up.
And you're like, whoa, yeah, yeah. It's really beautiful. I would also like to say, though, that anyone wants to come to Fort Worth, there's a beautiful sunken garden about 3 miles from where I'm sitting at the Fort Worth Botanic Garden. Their Japanese garden was also a quarry, and or maybe it was a trash dump, we're not sure. But it was really a hole in the ground, and now it's a beautiful place. So just, get out there and see some things. All right, here's our turf field day. We also kind of recapped this on Chat with Green Aggies, and it was a lot of fun. I didn't get to walk around that much because I was over here, weed IDing and talking about weeds. But the things that were close to me, the things that were close to me were these two things. Had the Shea trials, and this is Zoysia Shea trials. You can see there's St. Augustine. Also, these really big blocks of grass are all St. Augustine. But so it made me think a lot about Zoysia. We do recommend it as a turf grass that can go from, kind of being in full sun to being in some shade and give you that same fine texture that you'd get from Bermuda, a nice look like that if that's what you want. But there's a lot of variation in the shade tolerance of different Zoysia cultivars. And so that was kind of interesting to see. And that's something that they're working on at the research center in Dallas. So I'm glad to see that breeding program. And then this is, I put this picture in for two reasons. This is Dr. Robert Puckett. He's talking about fire ants, but you can see the house is right here next to the research center, right? Everybody can see that. So I like to tease Chrissy and Becky about why don't they live right there? They could walk out their back alley, jump over this fence, and they'd be at work. But, neither one of them live right here. For obvious reasons. Anyway, so he was talking, and the one thing that he said that stuck in my mind, and it was kind of an interesting follow-up to Chrissy's comments about the herbicide label changes, is that some fire ants, because they can live for like 10 years, have outlived the product life cycle of products that are designed to kill them. So that kind of really stuck in my mind, that fire ants, because they can live so long, for insects especially, might have a longer life cycle than some of the products that we use to get rid of them. So it was kind of interesting. Also, kind of respect that. And then IPPS is something I look forward to each and every year. I have tons of pictures from IPPS each and every year. We were in Mobile, Alabama this year. This is Jim Van Antwerp from Greenleaf Nurseries in El Campo. And before I left, I was talking to one of my committee members, Melanie Magura, who works for the city of Fort Worth here in Fort Worth. And she said, oh, you're going to IPPS. Will you see Jim? And I said, yeah, I sure might. You know, he often comes. And the first morning, Sunday morning, you get on the bus, you know, you're heading out for your bus tour. And I sat down and there was Jim right there across the aisle from me. It seemed just like a small horticultural world because Melanie had done an internship with him when she was a student at Texas A&M, and I did not know that. So I got to see Jim and send Melanie this picture of Jim saying hi, which was really great. One of the nurseries we went to was Flowerwood Nursery, and these pictures are all actually from Flowerwood because they had some interesting things going on. This is just, there were millions, I mean, literally like, I think 7 million encore azalea cuttings in this, you know, nursery. And it was amazing how many cuttings of encore azaleas they were propagating. And so it just kind of blows your mind away when you think about how that started from just a you know, Buddy Lee looking for azaleas that rebloomed, making crosses, selecting azaleas. Of course, it's been doing it for quite a while now, but it's kind of amazing. And you see those out everywhere you go. This was one of the little things that I thought was awfully clever at Flowerwood. When they're getting ready to ship these Loropetalum out, and I apologize for not looking the name up of this one. It's one of the dwarf ones and it has a real trailing habit. You have to trim it quite a bit to get it ready to go. And they do it on top of this 10-inch PVC pipe inside this larger nursery container. And then they take these trimmings and stick them. So there they are. They're collecting propagation materials and trimming to get ready for shipping at the same time in this clever little homemade contraption here. So I thought that was pretty amazing. And I will tell you that those propagation crews were working so fast. We were all marveling at how well they were working and asking every single person that talked to us how much they get paid, and no one would tell us. So there you go. But they do work on a piecework scale. So the faster they work, you know, they get paid more money, and they were working so fast. It was amazing. This is another little thing here. They use these forks to space and set plants. So they put them on the trailer in the pattern that they need to be in. And then they've got strings on the ground so that they can place them in the pattern that they need to be in. And one guy can do this from his forklift. This guy so impressed me because he had to get off the lift twice, and he buckled and unbuckled his seatbelt both times. And of course, everybody was watching him, but I was just impressed because I probably would have forgotten to do that. I was impressed with his commitment to safety. But they place them out. And then of course, someone kind of has to move a few things around, and they have modified these long screwdrivers by just putting this little thing on the end. And this container has a little lip on it. Whoops. Keep clicking on things. But this container has a little lip on it, and this is how they move them around without bending over. It was just so clever. IPPS is the best because you always learn little things like that. You always get to see stuff. I don't know why, it just makes me so happy to see these pictures. Oh, and this is also something that makes me both happy and sad. Another thing I didn't get to do in 2020 was go to California spring trials with Dr. Brent Pemberton. It's something I've wanted to do for a long time, but I did get to do it in 2021. And then of course, as y'all probably noticed, Dr. Pemberton is retiring from his position at Overton. So I'm super grateful that I got to go with Brent to California and Paul and these nice guys, Wayne McKay and Gary McDonald from the University of Arkansas. We had a wonderful time. I saw so many great plants, and you can see all those plants on our playlist because Dr. Pemberton did a little thing for us and talked about the trials with us. So if you go to our playlist, you can hear his kind voice and look at lots of great plants. And I'm really grateful to him for all his years of service to Texas A&M AgriLife Research. And I'll certainly miss being able to go to Overton and just hang out with him. But that's that. And finally, in our year in rear view, this is Martin's Nursery, and I just like their personalized license plate. So I just wanted to show that to you all because, you know, a nursery truck should say Clear on it. And that's all I've got. I think Dr. Ong is up next.
Yeah, so I'm just going to go through real quick, kind of give you a roundup of the numbers and what we saw in the clinic and what we saw through the emails and phone calls and people not leaving us alone. So you can move on to the next one. Just some numbers for you guys.
Whoa.
So just kind of real quick, this is just the number of samples that we got through the year. We are about 2,500 samples. The one thing that's kind of interesting is we actually were processing a lot of seed samples this year because of an international regulatory type situation. That's why you see that green bar, and those are vegetable seeds. But in terms of ornamentals, just since we're talking ornamentals here, if you look at the categories, turfgrass, trees, and then the ornamentals, we classified it as herbaceous or woody. You'll notice as trees, we got a lot of tree samples in. This is shade trees. What was not included here is we do have samples coming into for like a fruit and nut, you know, citrus trees and so on. If it's not residential, it'll be listed as that as a fruit tree for the commercial operators. But by far, we got a lot of what we would classify trees in terms of like shade trees. All right, let's go to the next one. Now, what I did was just kind of parse out the shade trees, the turfgrass, and then the ornamentals, just to break it down by diagnosis type. Now, even though we get about 2,500 samples, you have to understand that could be 2, 3, 4 different things happening on the plant at the same time. So this is actually broken down by the diagnosis type. And the one thing that I do want to point out here is you'll notice that big orange bar, that's fungal. So for the most part, in terms of diagnosis, what we do see is a lot of fungal type situations or diagnosed to be caused by fungal agents. Now, there's a few other things there. There's one that we said there's no diagnosis, basically nothing done. That's few of that. And then there's a chunk that you'll notice pretty significantly in many of the bars is a dark blue, no pathogen found. And what's interesting about this is this happens when we get samples in. Now, all we can tell with this samples is what's on it. So if it has symptoms, but we are unable to pull or recover the pathogen, it would be a no pathogen found. So now I didn't break this down, nor do we take, you know, real data in terms of was the sample viable, or follow up to find out how they treat the sample. We do ask that samples be sent overnight fresh, because that way we can ensure that if there is a biological agent there, we can recover it. So keep in mind here, you know, if you are thinking about sending in samples in the future, remember this: if there's a biological agent there and you cut that sample, but you leave it in your car, truck, whatever, and it's hot, that is going to more than likely kill that pathogen to the point that we will not be able to recover, and it could interfere with the detection of it as well. So fresh samples are always good. And if you think about what type of samples to target, always think about where would the pathogen be feeding at that point. So keep in mind is when you see transition areas or areas that you suspect that the pathogen would be doing its work in terms of destroying plant material, those are the parts that we would want. So flip on to the next slide, please. So these are just the numbers that are associated with the slide previously, just to point out in terms of the numbers. Here, just to point out trees, you can see that fungal 922 times fungal agents were reported in the tree samples that we got. You can move on to the next one. All right. Laura has already mentioned some of this in terms of being long-term. What I want to just kind of echo on that part is to show you some of the samples that came in. And I want to point out one thing. The diagnosis of some of the samples, well, most of the samples are actually fungal. So you can find a fungal agent, and very often, whether it's on a conifer or even a hardwood tree, you would find something like Phytophthora Canker, or quite often on conifers, you might even find Ceridium. I believe we also have found quite a number, at least on the woody ornamentals, issues with Phytophthora type related problems, and Phytophthora Canker, which the question always comes back, was it the pathogen that killed the plant, or did the cold damage predispose the plant to being attacked by those pathogens? Now, at the clinic, we don't answer those type of questions. The clinic, what they do is they see what is there and they report what is being seen or recovered. I do want to point out, though, we do see an increase, especially with tree issues, not necessarily, that are declining, that are showing damage, freeze-like damage, but associated with that are various different type of disease problems that are associated with fungal agents. So the last 3-4 months or so, we've been getting a lot of reports that the bark has been popping off. Sometimes there are nice clean wood beneath. Other times there would be fuzzy stuff akin to something like hypoxylin canker. Now, with that too, is it the coal or is it the pathogen? Well, if there is no fuzzy stuff, maybe it's easier to address and say, oh, that's just the coal. But you leave it long enough, you might see some staining, some other kind of fungal agent there. Short of it, what we believe is happening, and Dr. Apple has mentioned this as well, is you do have all those opportunistic and sometimes what we call facultative parasites. Those opportunists that when you have a weakened tree where plant cell tissue has been destroyed through the cold damage, releasing those cell contents that has sugars and so on, are good environment food for the fungal agents or the pathogens. And so what you do have is sort of a series of things happening that contribute to the decline of that tree. This do happens in woody ornamentals as well. And we do expect to see even more damage building up in the next 8 months or so. And so I do anticipate next year, coming out of the cold and then going through the spring and so on, we are likely, if you're talking about the junipers, the cypress and that sort of thing, I would not be surprised at all where we would get increased reports of either Phytophthora Canker or Ceridium canker, that sort of things. And we would also probably get quite a few more reports of trees basically not coming out from dormancy. So it probably go in and pretty much kick the bucket. So keep an eye out for that. The sad part about some of this established trees is there's really at this point not very good prognosis out of it. There's not much you can do for it if it's on the downward spiral. So that's the one unfortunate thing. Let's hit the next slide. Now, what I call some notables, abnormalities, things of fun stories to hear about ornamental regulatory type situations. Few things happen. This is 2020 going into 2021. There were incidents of where a select agent, and if you are not aware of the select agent, basically it's one of about 100 microbial organisms that's put on a list called the select agent list that is said could be used by terrorists to attack the United States. Well, this biological agent, Ralstonia solanaceum race 2 is essentially a potato pathogen. but was introduced into the United States through, of all things, geranium cuttings, and kind of distributed throughout the US. In Texas, we had several nurseries that actually had those plants from the originating nursery. So there were USDA and Texas Department of Ag was there doing some mitigation work, some monitoring work, and so on. So those were some of the fun, scary stuff that happened. And I say scary because it's really scary to the nursery owner, because if that was detected, if it was not eradicated, and even then they had to destroy a large number of plants within certain types of plants that could be potential hosts for that bacteria. We also had a similar incident with sudden oak death pathogen Phytophthora Remorum, where it was detected in a nursery elsewhere that had distributed a bunch of plants, camellias and azaleas, and some of those actually came to Texas. So again, this was considered a trace forward. So there was some checking to make sure that everything was caught and nothing managed to get out into the open. So those were some of the two fun things that happened in the background quietly, but chomp up a lot of man hours. Another thing that was in the news, quite well, not in news, but in discussion and arguments, is this whole thing about boxwood diseases. Is it boxwood blight, Calanectria pseudonaviculata, or is it boxwood stem dieback, or is it boxwood branch dieback? So you got three different pathogens here. Now, Calanectria pseudonaviculata is not found, or at least been detected, in Texas. It has been in Louisiana. So this has still been a huge back and forth argument between nurseries and Texas, the Department of Agriculture's of where can receive and where do not want to receive those type of plants because of this potential pathogen that could quickly defoliate the boxwood. Now, the dieback, stem dieback, Calototicum teobromicula, it's around, it's been detected in Texas, and I think it's more prevalent than we actually have noted it for, but we have also associated it to sort of like a damage on the plant, whether it be freeze damage or heat damage. And then subsequently, this is appears to be somewhat of a slow developing disease, which can be visualized as cankers too. So what's happening with that is we are seeing plants with individual branches dying and so on. So when you follow down on that branch, you'll find cankers. And what I'm afraid is where we have boxwood hedges and all that that was exposed to the winter storm. I think we're going to see more of it. We saw some of that this year. I think we're going to see more of that damage next year, because over the year that those are damaged that the that fungus can grow in there. Phytophthora oomycete, year in, year out, continue to be a problem with boxwoods. Anytime there is excessive moisture, too much wetness, improper irrigation, we get Phytophthora popping up in the landscape. And in boxwoods, that's pretty, how would you say it?
I would say
it's very common. Amazing. You see the whole plant starting to get individual branches turning that golden brown, and then eventually that whole plant turn golden brown and starts to get darker and darker.
Yeah, so, and the leaves typically stay on the plant, like they're not going to fall off.
That's correct. It's a quick death type deal thing. And then the last thing I just want to point out is we at the clinic we get some stuff that we deal with diagnosing or doing detection for citrus diseases on surveys. Mainly want to point out here is we focus really more on the stuff that are happening in the other parts of Texas other than South Texas, because we have the A&M Kingsville Citrus Center that handles about the 8 counties down there in the production areas. But we handle all the samples that come through from the Upper Gulf Coast area. So you're talking about the greater Houston area, and there is a quarantine zone there. And so what happens is they have been aggressively sampling for citrus canker, and we are seeing more and more places, or at least citrus canker quarantine areas being expanded, and I think it will continue to be expanded. One interesting thing, a study that we did for USDA was to try and figure out what did Winter Storm Uri did to the survival of Xanthomonas. Now, in literature, there have been reports that this bacterium was able to survive in the woody tissue and then come out and do damage again. Well, we just did a small study with an undergraduate student, and what we found out was we could not detect Xanthomonas citri from those samples, and we took from stem, from leaves that had fallen down after, a couple of months after the Winter Storm Uri. But we stumbled on a few interesting things. There are some Xanthomonas, they were just not citri, at least the gene that we targeted. But then we also had one situation where we had a leaf that still had some green. And so we were able to take at least part of the damaged area, crush it up, and re-inoculate some green parts. And lo and behold, we got symptoms that looked like citrus canker, but it never turned out or was detected molecularly as or identified as citrus canker. So we have no idea what's going on. There may be other things that are happening out there. There could be other strains that we may not have the detection for, but those are things that I think USDA is wanting us to look into the future to try and figure that out. Another one thing that's interesting was the fact that with citrus canker after Winter Storm Uri, we thought, hey, this is going to die down. At least we're not going to get as many incidents. Unfortunately, that was not true. There are new plants that leaped out and start getting canker. So the question is, where did the bacterium come from? And we don't have any good answers to that yet. So this is one of those type of situations where, we have no idea what's going on here. It's going to be fun to try and find some answers to that. But in terms of if you are in the greater Houston area, or even along the Gulf Coast, take note, there are new quarantine zones for citrus canker and for citrus greening as well. And keep in mind that citrus greening, there are a number of counties now on the, Coastal Bend area that you need to be aware that are now quarantine counties for citrus greening. So Kleber, I think it is Nueces, and a few other counties in that Coastal Bend area. And all this can be found on the Texas Department of Ag website. All right, I think that's it, right? Oh, almost forgot. This is a plug. So there's been a lot of shakeup going on with extension here and with AgriLife. And one of the efforts that they're doing is moving a lot of the extension publications to supposedly a site that would make it easier to get to. So there is a new extension resource website, agrilifelearn.tamu.edu. Not all those free publications have been migrated over, but I do expect, they say that it should be completed by March of 2022, but there are some already in there. So, if it's a free publication, what I do like about it, there is now a single tap button, which allows you to download without needing to provide any credit card or sign in type information. So I think that's helpful. But at this point, there are only a few newer fact sheets in there. They are currently migrating others in there. They said it'll take 2-3 months. So we'll see. Just wanted you guys to have this bookmark somewhere so you can go check it. This will also get you into the catalog for the online courses and some of the other resources as well.
Yeah, and I'd like to say that it is mostly online courses, and we've been working, Chrissy did one for me, but we've been working on trying to put some of the pros and parks resources online. So we have 4 pros and parks classes. Chrissy did a sports turf management course for me. Dr. Fawad Jabber did a stream management course for me. And Dr. Jamie Ray Walker did a maintenance planning course for parks departments. So those are all
lab and the foreign lab, the productivity of the projects.
So there's a lot of cool stuff on AgriLife Learn. I think they're trying to make that the platform. You can also buy like a t-shirt too on there. It's kind of crazy, but anyway.
Yep. So I think that's all I got for you guys. And, thanks for hanging out with us for this year. Hopefully we'll be able to continue to do this some next year. So back to you, Dr. Gu.
Okay. Well, Laura, you want to go to the next slide?
Sure.
And
Dr. Gu, it's oh, well, that's Kevin's slide there, but
yeah.
All right, there you go.
Obviously the event that has the largest impact, mostly negative, somewhat, positive impact on the landscape plants was probably the winter storm Uri. And if you look at the landscape, it's a lot of the trees. Trees are very resilient, not like annuals, perennials. One single event, you may see that just turning brown, but trees are resilient, and the showing of the symptoms, the dying is a slow process, and that being slow, and also, you may see the symptoms coming up, the delayed symptoms that you may see those this year at the end of the year, or maybe next year. So what I'm going to talk about here is tree pruning, and mainly focusing on getting rid of branches, the branches that may be dead. Next, please. So if you look at the trunk and can you see my mouse? Thank you. So this is what the tree trunk and the branch looks like with the bark removed, and you can see that there's the connection there. Next, please. So in the tree trunk and the side branches, there are these nutrient and water transportation system. So that's I'm going to use the red one as the transportation system in the trunk. Next, please. And then the green one, that's the transportation system, water and nutrient transportation system going to the branch. The next one. And naturally, there is a kind of like a valve system. There's kind of like a valve system there. Yes, thank you. That was very good. That was very good. The valve system there that kind of shut it off. So that's the transition zone. Yeah, that's what the shaded area shows. And you want to prune, you want to cut it just right a little bit outside of that transition zone. Laura, you and we're just such great partners on this. You know exactly what I'm going to talk about, and you know exactly where your mouse need to go. Thank you. So this is transition region, between the trunk and the branch is called the branch collar, and that's what Laura's mouse is pointing out there, between the two green lines. So the idea, like I said before, the ideal pruning cut is just beyond the branch collar. It's just right outside that. Next, please. So, in a few cases, the tree actually tell us where to make the correct pruning cut. And, however, in the majority of the cases, we make an educated guess where the proper pruning cut should be made. Next, please. So this is, as you can see that, there's that transition zone, and you can tell the texture is different. The texture, at this branch collar from the main trunk to the side branch, you see the transition. Next, please. And that's where the pruning cut need to be. Next. So sometimes on these younger trees that, if you look at it seems like the texture on the main trunk and the branch seems to be very similar. Where is the branch collar? Next, please. Ta-da! So there's the red line represents the, on the right, represent the branch bark ridge. And then you just go, yeah, exactly like Laura's line is going there. Yeah, that's make a cut. That's make a cut right there. Thank you. So if you look at this one, and you could kind of tell this one is probably cut too close on the bottom. So we're going to show some of the examples that, the cut may not be ideal. So if you look at on the right side, that's a good cut, compared to the previous one, it's not as close to the bottom. And the left one, it's bad because of, that it's tearing down, it's cut, it's not cut into, it was not cut into the main stem transportation system, but because of the weight of the side branch is being cut in. And this is what we're going to talk about, the 3 steps that you may have heard about, the 3 steps to cut it to prevent this kind of damage to the main trunk. Next, please. So this is some of the things that, we need to avoid. We want, remember the valve between the main trunk and the side branch. We want to shut it off right there, because otherwise we're gonna, if we leave a big stub like this, this side branch is not completely shut off. There's going to be water sprouts, some other things coming up that, just not something that you will want after the tree pruning. So this stub, eventually it's kind of like a foreign object because the valves are not shut off. It's kind of stabbing the main trunk, and could be it's creating an entryway for water, insects, fungi, and stuff like that. Next, please. So proper pruning cuts can be identified later by uniform healthy wound closure. So the plant, although this is a pretty significant size, big cut, but you can see that it's closing on itself. And this is, this is what we want. And as you can see that, not like the previous side branch stab. Next one, please. So this is the 3 steps, the 3 cuts that I mentioned, to prevent that bad cut we seen before. Really, just, so cut number 1 is about a foot from the main trunk and start at the bottom. Next. So this is the first cut is cut upward. The second cut is go about just an inch or 2 further out on the limb and start cutting from the top. This one, second cut, is cutting down. And then, so after these first 2 cuts, it's left with a short piece that's easier to handle. So basically these first 2 cuts take away most of the weight. And because the lower cut, because the first cut, at the bottom, it's, cutting upward. So even when the weight of that branch is falling down, it wouldn't, it wouldn't peel, it wouldn't do much damage yet to the side branch, at least not to the main branch. So with this, majority of the weight of the side branch taken off, the next one, the third cut, it will be easy. Just follow the previous, instruction. That's it. Thank you, Laura. We really appreciate you all being, with us for all these 2 years, and we have all the previous recordings. on the playlist, Chat with Green Aggie playlist on the in YouTube, the Texas Plant Clinic YouTube channel. Under that YouTube channel, there's several playlists, and Chat with Green Aggies is one of them. And you can go to that playlist and just review any of the previous ones that we have done. And I actually have, when I talk about, want to look at some of the things I talk about, I actually look back to our presentation last year about the same time. It kind of helps me to prepare for the presentation for this time of year around. So it's been helpful even to myself, and look at some of the things that we have chatted about. And this is a in not so formal format of our education outreach. I really hope you enjoyed it. Laura, what do you think?
I think it's a wrap. Happy 2022, folks.
Yes. Hope you all have a nice break, and just look forward to 2022. And next is the evaluation, I think.
Yep.
All right.